Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to YouTube live on Darwinian Delusions. And today I have a special session with you, Converting to Islam with Stephen Rust. Assalamu alaikum, Stephen.
Wa alaikum assalam, akhi.
How are
How
you
are you?
doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm marvelous, bro. How are you doing?
I love it that you're wearing Adidas because you were also wearing Adidas in the picture.
I said
Uh,
this, alhamdulillah.
yeah. So firstly, Stephen, as you know, we do these live sessions every day at the same time, and we have pretty much the same regular audience, but it's building. Mostly Muslims, some non-Muslims as well.
Alhamdulillah.
So just to get us started off with, is this your first Ramadan?
Um, no, this will be my second Ramadan. Well, technically my third, being sort of interested in Islam, so to speak. The first kind of time I started taking Islam seriously was Ramadan 2 years ago, and although I didn't complete it properly, I was I tried a few days here and there, and even then I was like, it's got something to it. This last year was like my first proper Ramadan, and this is you know.
Yeah. It's a bit, I mean, last year I'm guessing you went to the mosques, you did the Taraweeh, you did what regular Muslims do, and this year you're at home.
Yeah, it's different, but that's what I feel for, like, born Muslims, everyone that's like so used to going to do Taraweeh and seeing their family and all that. So it's you guys I feel for, to be honest. For me, it's just like,
Yeah, it's a bit different for everybody, I guess, but I think it's important to understand um, ibadah, worship of Allah, is not linked to a certain building or a certain ritual. It's very flexible. So it's not really, it's not really problematic. And I think a lot of people, they seem to get hung up on the building and the rituals. When in reality, it's just okay. Just move on and do what you can.
That's right. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from Ramadan, is to be like flexible, to be able to, like, nothing. There's never ever going to be a perfect time for anything. Like my first Ramadan, one lesson I learned. There's so many times where, like, when I wasn't fasting, obviously when it's not Ramadan, if I'm gonna work out or something, I'll be like, oh, I'll have some food first. I'll do this. I'll do that. There's loads of things that I, later procrastinate in that. And then with Ramadan, because you're not in that state, you're not going to eat. You're not going to save it till later. You're like, I'll just do it now because that's all I can do. I don't want to be thinking about how hungry I am or whatever. So just get and do it. And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. So to be flexible.
Yeah, definitely be flexible. Now, I wanted to sort of go off into why you accepted Islam and what your background was. So firstly, were you someone that always had some form of faith, or was there a point in your life where you did not have a belief in anything?
Well, I always, very young, our family was sort of fairly practicing Christian. Like, it's from my mum's side. My mum's dad was Roman Catholic, and he went and stayed at a monastery, and like he was quite serious about that. And then it kind of passed down through my mum's side. And we did go to church every Saturday, I believe, when we were quite young, and we recited like Black Paternoster before we went to bed and all that. But then entering kind of secondary school, even late like primary school, like getting to around the age of 10 or so, it kind of fizzled out a bit. And like in my mind, God was always like, I never kind of really thought too much about there not being a God. I was just like, I knew some people didn't believe, but I was just like, oh yeah, like, I believe in God. Didn't even think too much about it. Then it was when, obviously, you're in secondary school, you're a teenager, things starting to get a bit different, and like the social aspect of things kind of come into it. And like, so that time God was really pushed to the back of my mind. But I'd never consider myself an atheist. I definitely think at one or two times I was just like, oh, imagine if there isn't a God. And I've, probably frantically Googled like proof for God, like I need to know. But I'd been consistent. And then it's funny because even when I was in secondary school. I thought I was, you know, living my best life, as they say. Like, I had a girlfriend, all this, had a bit of money from a job, like weekend job hours, so I had all the fresh clothes and all that. I was doing all sorts of things, and then I was actually stopped in town by a Mormon. I didn't know he was a Mormon at the time. He started asking me questions about God and purpose in life. And even though I thought at that time, like, you know, these good times are going to last forever, like, I'm on top of the world, me and all that, it made me think, like, yeah, like, I haven't thought about God in a while now. And it made me kind of think. And he gave me the Mormon Bible. He gave me it wrapped in it, so I didn't know it was the Mormon Bible at first. But he gave me this book. And then I was meeting up with my girlfriend in town and whatever and all that. And I told her when I met up, I was like, I spoke to this guy. He's a really nice guy. And he had some interesting points in that. She's like, oh, yeah. And we saw, and I was like, he gave me this. She's like, what is it? And then it was at that point when we found it was for Mormons. We were like, oh. And then there was kind of associations in my mind. Oh, you know, that's a cult. Don't let them brainwash you and all this. Like, I won't get involved in that. And I was like, oh. But for a moment there, I was really like, yeah, God. Why have I put that to the back of my mind? But alhamdulillah.
Yeah. So how old were you when you first started thinking about that?
I would say around, that was when I was about 17, 18. And even though that kind of phase of what am I doing in my life, did kind of die down for a bit, it returned when I was like 19, 20-ish. And I'll tell you this, like, kind of pinnacle moment was at this house party, and it was the New Year's party. We'd all got silly, you know, the typical throwing up, a lot of this, a lot of that, and it was just a typical, like, what you think that you, when you're a teenager, you think this is what you're living for. It's what life's about, the sesh, having a good time and all that. But I remember got a bit silly, all that, and then I always made sure I drank a lot of water after I got drunk. It's unfortunate because I thought, like, oh, I don't want to hangover all that. And so I'd made a big point, even though I got in a ridiculous place, I'd made a point of drinking a load of water. And I actually went to sleep like an hour before the whole countdown. So I missed that or that. Like, I was gone. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, everyone had gone to bed. I kind of come in and out of consciousness, whatever. Went and got a bit of food and all that. I woke up and I was just completely fine. Didn't have a hangover or anything. And I was just like, what am I doing? What are you doing? You just made an absolute clown of yourself a whole night. You know, you've been sick on like your clothes or whatever. You've just been like, you've wasted a load of money. Like all that drink, you know, we spent the evening going to supermarket, get a load of drink, all this, you know, preparing this. And I was like, why am I like, the happiness isn't in the drink. The happiness is being with your friends and that. The drink is, at that, like, one of the first times, like, wait, why are we even drinking? I don't even taste that. Like anyone that tells you they like the taste of certain drinks, but like, you know, I was just like, that made me really question this whole kind of, you know, the kind of secular dream of what life should be about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit surprised when I meet converts like yourselves who at this young age start thinking about these questions. They start thinking about, you know, like, let me do a trajectory in my life. Where am I headed off to? Just the other day, I had a live stream with Massacre, who was similar. And for him, it was going in and out of jail and this type of stuff. But I find that this is very unique at that age to be thinking like that. I mean, most people at that age that I've interacted with, that I've tried to communicate Islam with, they're just kind of like, look, I'm enjoying my life. I'm happy. Come back. You know, they got this attitude like, come back when I'm like 40, you know, right now.
Yeah, that's big. That's right.
Yeah. So what made you think, no, I gotta think about this. Where am I headed? What's the point of life? Like, what made you make the decision that the vast majority of youngsters don't?
I've always liked to think of myself as being a bit of a, like, I always liked my alone time. I wasn't completely like an introvert. Like I said, I could be a clown and that with my friends. I did like social company, but I also really appreciate my alone time, just thinking about things. And at that time, like, I was kind of, I'd been able to be involved with like some interesting things, especially by that age. Like, I'd done acting, I'd like performed on stage in front of people. I'd been paid to do like 1 or 2 professional wrestling matches and that. Like, I was making a little bit, yeah. I'll send you some photos. I'll halalify them at some point. But I was like, I'd be getting into music. Like, even though I hadn't recorded proper songs there, you know, did a little thing for my friends. And they're like, oh, mate, you know, you're sick, all this. I got my black belt recently as well in sixth form and all that. So like, I'd accomplished a lot. Like, I didn't get like, you know, professional, really serious in any of that. But especially for a young guy, you don't really care about how like far you get at that point. Like making money off, or you know, I don't even need to make money off anything for now. Like, I'm not even in my 20s yet. Like, I've got all the time in the world. But then when I started like the whole thing about accomplishments and doing things right, they only mean anything because we've said that they mean something. Like me saying I've done this only has any power because, you know, as a society we've been conditioned to be like, oh, you know, the people that have, like, when you're in school, when you're in secondary school, the kids that have got drunk by the age of 14, like at the time that's a big deal. Like, you know, they're like, oh, I've done this. It's like, whoa, like this guy's something serious over here. And it's like, it's really not. Like, we know it's just ridiculous. But at the time, because you're in that whole scene, you're conditioned to think that way. And then I started really just, like, in my alone time and all this, I was like, all of this, like, I've got all these boxes ticked, but what's it doing for me? Like, I don't even know how happy I am. And like, I just started thinking about that a lot because it's at the time when a lot of people go into uni and stuff. And even though I'd done some like foolish things in gatherings and that, I knew uni was like another kettle of fish. And I was seeing people go like completely off the rails. And I was like, you weren't like this at school. Like, I really respected people that are a bit more level-headed. They didn't just do what the crowd did. I respected people that, like, you know, stuck to their guns sort of thing. And there was actually like non-practicing Muslim girl that I got very close with that, like, when I saw a few kind of Islamic values shine through, even though she wasn't strictly practicing, I was like, I appreciated a lot. And seeing her go off to uni and just disregard all of that, like everyone else, that like all the non-religious people, I was like, what's going on, man? Like, you know, and then it just made me like, it was seeing everyone go to uni and kind of completely change, go from being like really kind of at school, people were a bit more innocent, people had their individuality more. Then when everyone went to uni, they just all kind of like, you know, brainwashed into thinking this one way, thinking that getting absolutely written off at a house party is, you know, the pinnacle of success. I was like, well, nah, this isn't for me.
And you were sort of, would you say that you achieved things too quickly? As in, like, you know, a lot of people, they struggle and strive before they get to a point, where you seem to have just got things very quickly, and, you know, the love of those things sort of goes down. Is that the case?
Definitely. I think that's like, I was kind of lucky to be like off chance, you know, meet certain people, get connections and stuff. And that's kind of what propelled me in certain areas so quickly. But then it kind of, before a lot of people had even got there, I'd almost felt like in some ways I'd like been there and done that. And that kind of made me think like you said, it made me double take. I felt like you know, I'm on top now, where everyone else is like the best times ahead of, you know, I've got uni next year. That's when things are going to get good. For me, I thought when everyone's gone off to uni, I was at work, you know, the biggest interaction I had with the opposite sex was like 35-year-old Claire from HR. And then all my friends are saying like, oh yeah, you know, this girl, this and all that. And I was just like, I felt like I was like an adult, and all my friends were like, you know, still teenagers and all that. And I was just like, man, I'm going to have to do some thinking here.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, because when I started work, and I started work at B&Q at the age of 16. Yeah, you start just, you know, you go from a place where everything's, you know, happy-go-lucky and, you know, this type of behavior, to a place where everyone's a bit more serious, and it's like, when you're going to turn up on at time, and then you meet people who are a bit miserable. You meet middle-aged people, and then you start thinking, oh my God, am I going to end up like that? So, you start getting these wake-up calls.
That was it. It was as I was like, is this going to be it for the rest of my life? Am I just going to live to get my paycheck and go home at the end of the month? Like, definitely.
And I want to like get into this. So when it comes to, obviously, you started thinking about obviously God, and I'm guessing you became Muslim in your 20s.
Yeah, 21. I'd say I took my
21.
shot.
Right, so you're about 23 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's the thing, right? I'll give you a scenario, and I want you to sort of just give anybody who's in this situation same sort of advice. So I met a guy who was very interested in becoming Muslim. I actually met him in the mosque, sitting at the back of the mosque, listening to the Jummah prayer. Yeah, and he himself was not joining in the prayer. So I thought, okay, this guy is interesting. He's obviously a non-Muslim. He's just sitting here. Anyway, I realized this guy is obsessed with Islam. He's like watching videos, watching lectures, attending the mosque, but he's not taking Shahada, right? And I kept thinking, why is he not doing that? Why is he not doing that? Why is he not doing that? And then when I spoke to him, he said, look, I don't want to take Shahada and I don't want to be a hypocrite. Like, he's a young guy. There's a lot of desires out there. There's a lot of things out there. And, the same with you. I mean, at the age of 21, you have access to so many things. And those things are very pleasurable and very attractive. And Islam is basically saying to you, no alcohol, no women, no parties. And, what seems very restrictive. So how do you psychologically prepare yourself and say to yourself, do you know what? I am going to choose something greater than something near me, which is a very difficult choice to make.
That is honestly one of the biggest questions, and that's the thing. Islam's portrayed as like a very reductionist kind of religion, like where you've got to think it's not just taking everything away and not giving you anything. You've got to look at everything it is giving you. So the sort of sense of long-term satisfaction, even a sense of brotherhood within the ummah, even picking up disciplines like the discipline to pray, discipline to fast, obviously. Like even learning Arabic and like meeting interesting people, like all these different cultures. Obviously, Allah created different cultures for us to get to know each other and create different tribes, etc. And that's the thing. People kind of immediately see it as like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. But look at all the doors it does get you to unlock. Like, and that's the way I saw it. I was like, all these kind of like all this lifestyle of drinking and partying and all that, like. Honestly, once you've been there and done that, like, once the honeymoon period is over with your relationship, once all these different things, they don't last very long. But what you get from embracing Islam obviously lasts a lifetime and beyond that, which is the most important thing to think about, of course. So that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, I get what you're saying, but you're being very rational. Right? And what I'm trying to get at is, why were you deciding to be rational when the vast majority of people your age are going to be like, I'm not going to listen to that. Like, I don't even want to think about that. They just have this apprehension that, no, I can't give this up. I can't give that up. And, like, I'm trying to understand, why are people like you making those very difficult decisions, and you're almost making them look very easy when I know they're not very easy. What's the differentiating factor?
That's a good question, very good question, very difficult question as well. And a part of it, if you look at something I saw, like you say, I know it sounds like very rational, but to me, just like seeing the trajectory of like so many people like start smoking, for instance, is the analogy is start smoking, because no one that ends up with a smoker or like 42 with a hole in their throat, when they were just having a few fags at a party, they never imagined or set out to be addicted, to be having nicotine cravings all day every day. But you see that, and we know that alcohol is a drug, we know that obviously like tobacco and that's a drug and all this, and it's just as obvious as it seems, like this is all really detrimental stuff. And I remember back in before all the partying, before the alcohol came, we were still happy kids. If anything, we were happier before all the drink and the drama came in. And that's a very interesting concept that like some of my friends talk about. Like we talk about the good old days and how innocent we were before like sixth form and all this, and like before year 10, 11 and all that. And like that didn't have half the things that it was almost when we thought we were being grown up, we thought we were being adult, that things started to like go wrong. We kind of like overcomplicated life and that.
Mm.
And that's what made me think, just, I mean, you look at the kind of the emphasis on like mental health these days and all that in society, and you think, okay, we're talking about the kind of effect, the result, but what about the cause? What's causing that? We're not questioning the society at all. We're just taking it on face value. We go out and drink and do all this and put all our eggs in the basket of materialism and escapism. We don't even think, well, what if we didn't? Like, no one even just thinks, well, what if not? And I
Mm.
don't know, that's just kind of always something I thought, why didn't this think outside the box, you know?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's definitely a psychological trait which helps converts, that you have to be able to go against the tide,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. Yeah.
I'm guessing, I'm just thinking back to some of my school friends who were kind of like you know, they're just like a average English guy. And, you know, they were mates and whatnot, but them converting, even though they had Muslim friends, and even though, you know, everyone's cool if you become a Buddhist or if you become like something a bit.
Yeah.
But as soon as you say Islam, it's just, you know, I can't imagine my own friends becoming Muslim and how their families and their friends and their you know, the locals in the area would react. And you know, so it's always very inspiring to see that, you know, you have people in the world who have that kind of trait, that look, if I believe something to be true, I'm going to follow it. It doesn't really matter if everybody goes you know, against me. So what are some of the things, like, okay, so now you obviously started thinking about God, and you mentioned that, you know, the people who got you thinking about it was the Mormons, but then later on when you're 21, you started thinking about it. But then when you started thinking about God, how did you come to Islam in particular?
Well, it was funny because all throughout my life, I had like really sort of like small, forgettable, when you're at that age, interactions with Muslims. Like when I was really young, me, my brother, and our mate, we were just being stupid. We were like, I mean, I wasn't even 10 at this point. We saw some birds flying over. We were walking past someone's drive. We thought, let's throw stones at the birds like you do. And obviously, I threw a stone, didn't hit a bird, but it went through a window of someone. And
Right.
that person's window was a Niqabi sister, and it's a Pakistani family, and they didn't come out with like a whip and say, "Come here, boy," and like all this. They asked, like, you know, what had happened, all this. I can't even remember how my parents got involved. Obviously, someone went to tell my parents. But long story short, we ended up being really close with that family. And he was taking me and my brother out in the field to play cricket and football and all that. And we, like, it was only my parents that told us off and all this. And at the time, I didn't know what Muslim meant. I didn't know what foreign meant. I just was like, oh, you know, these different, you know, these darker people are being really nice, actually. And then various things like that. And obviously, when I was in sixth form, like I said, like there was one or two like non-practicing Muslims, and just they had certain values. Like, even though obviously they weren't practicing, there was things like backbiting. They weren't as comfortable backbiting as everyone else, and things. And just the idea of discipline. Like, you think, I did martial arts when I was younger, and so from a very young age, so I always kind of was taught that, like, discipline, and I saw that discipline gets you somewhere. Like, you don't get anywhere if you're not disciplined. All the professional athletes, whether you're like, you know, bodybuilding, whether you're an artist, footballer, whatever it is, you need discipline to be successful, right? And so anytime I saw discipline, even in relationships, people that are more disciplined enough to sort of bite their tongue and not just say, more successful relationships, and I just thought, this discipline, this kind of, you know, being at school and being like, not just saying whatever because you felt like saying it, made me respect these people because I saw they had social discipline. And of course, around the time I started like thinking about religion in general, I was looking at all different sorts of like Buddhism and like various forms of Sikhism. I got interested at one point, but ISIS was a big thing in the news, right? And you know,
Oh.
they were getting absolutely, the Muslims were getting the worst press ever. And at this point, I was working at Sainsbury's, and there was a hijabi sister there that I was fairly well, as far as like colleagues go, like, you know, we got on. She was very polite and all that. And I sort of felt like, nah, this isn't right. Like, the Muslims I know aren't like this ISIS stuff. And then of course when you think like, well, hang on, ISIS, all they're doing is killing Muslims anyway, that kind of defeats that whole. But I was just like, all these like, this doesn't make sense. It maybe the fact that Muslims got bad press maybe because I knew it wasn't right in their mind. I was like, well, I know it's not right, but I don't know why it's not. When I defend Islam to racist and Muslims, I was like, I need to actually know some facts here rather than just go, no, they're not like that. I was like, I need to have something behind my argument here. And so that's how I sort of really started learning about Islam, see what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and I was like, this stuff's good. Like, this definitely got some truth to it. So that's how Islam came to.
And you got a copy of the Quran, or what did you?
So I was really interested for I'd say like a year. I almost like I'd stopped drinking. I think it was like 1 month out of the year I allowed. When it was my birthday month and Christmas month, I was like, all right, I'll allow myself to get, because that's when everything's kicking off. But I'd adopted a lot of principles and kind of, I wasn't going around telling everyone I was Muslim, but I kind of considered myself Muslim all this. I went to Regent's Park Mosque in London, and I just told a few people there, like, oh, I'm interested in Islam. And they're so nice to me. They gave me so much attention. They gave me 2 Qur'ans. I think one was a Tafsir Qur'an and one like really sort of very English looking one with all the calligraphy, the classic like black and gold, whatever. And so I got the Quran, met Muslims, all this, continue watching, good old Mufti Menk or whatever online. And it just perpetuated like that. And I was just like, it kind of engulfed my life so much. I was like, well, hang on, I'm not drinking. I believe in God. I believe in the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I was like, Steve, you're a Muslim, mate. Like, why don't you just? But it did take me a while, like, before I actually took my shahada, because I thought, it's such a big leap. I don't want to be a bad Muslim. I want to do it properly. All this,
And also, it's interesting, when I think about the fact that in Islam we believe the Quran guides and misguides. Somebody can read the Quran and be like, what the heck is this? I don't believe in this. This is crazy. Yeah. And somebody else reads it and is like, wow, sense. And I've seen these reactions, and I interviewed Ben a few days ago, and he said he read the Quran, and when he read the Quran purely to refute it, purely from his own words, in an arrogant way, he said it was exactly what I expected, just a book of like fables. And when I came back and I read it, when I was humble and I was looking for guidance, it was like a different book. So obviously, when you first picked it up, you didn't pick it up from the perspective of, let me refute it or let me, mock it. It was more like, let me understand, let me find what's right. And I think that's a very important attitude to have.
Definitely. And when I kind of understood the weight of the Quran, before I'd even read a single word out of the Quran, I understood that, all right, this isn't just divinely inspired, this isn't just like, this is God's. And so I was really, really picky on trying to get like an accurate translation of this. Like, no, I want the most accurate, I want it poetic, but also and I was just like really particular. And I was like, well, hang on, right, I'll do the best of what I've got. Obviously, I've been to the mosque and all this. I've been given Quran, so like, you can't have a clearer sign than that when you're given 2 Quran. Like, just read one of them. I was like, right, I'm just gonna read this, and just the timelessness, like the way that Allah describes certain types of people and stuff. Like, it doesn't just sound like this really old kind of outdated. Like you can apply it in a very particular way to like, modern social trends, and that was kind of the biggest thing that a lot of people my age, when you think about like what they call like institutionalized religion, and that, you think like, oh, they're all, they're profound for the time. The stories are good, but they're outdated now. They don't count. Those rules don't mean anything. But now just hearing like, I mean, even one interaction I liked, so off the cuff a bit, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was told, when the Quraysh came to him about the Prophet flying to Jerusalem and the land of the Sham, and they were just like, this is ridiculous. How can you believe this? Like, if he said it happened, then, and that just stuck with me. I was like, yeah, that's I see myself having that conversation with my friends sometimes, where like, if a mirror, we're talking about miracles or whatever, and they're just like, what do you believe that happened? I was like, look, if it says it happened, bro, like, it's got everything else right so far. I think it's been on the money with a lot of things, and like for me to just disregard it now, like I didn't see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really beautiful story of Abu Bakr, and I really love how you relate that. Because at the end of the day, you know, for a believer, if your belief in God is strong, everything else follows.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
So, for example, what's the difference between a plant growing, right, which is so natural, something we see every day, and the Prophet splitting the moon or going to heaven? For God, it's the same. It's literally God just changing creation.
Exactly.
But you only really understand that if your belief in God is strong. And I think this is one of the mistakes we sometimes make in the da'wah, is we start talking about something in Islam like a miracle or a law or whatever, without first agreeing there is a God. If someone doesn't believe in God, everything else is not going to make any sense to them.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the first point.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said though, like, you know, God created everything in existence, sustains everything in existence. Imagine if like the bees just decided they're going to take a day off and not do what they're told, not do what they're programmed. Like, you know, everything would crumble. And so the fact that all this is created and it continues to be sustained, but you think just one very small in comparison action is just no, I'm not buying that. Like, you know, you think of the example, Yusuf, he talks about the fact that obviously when water is cold enough it freezes, when it's hot enough it boils, but then if it's like exposed to enough pressure it can do both. And like to our limit, and like no, like if you hadn't known that, if you hadn't appreciated that fact, and someone told you like, oh, it's the water that was freezing and boiling at both, whatever, you'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. But like, obviously that's just our limited understanding of things. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely. And even when you think about, you know, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I actually think about consciousness, right? So as Allah says in the Quran, you know, when you're sleeping, He takes away your soul. Like, I find it really bizarre how I'm like out of consciousness for so long, and then I open my eyes and I'm conscious again, right? And even it's sometimes a little bit scary to think that all those hours you were practically dead, like for all intents and purposes, you were dead, yeah? And then just, you know, I've been reading about consciousness quite a lot, and I'm just, it's something so powerful when you think about it, that we have this ability to think, oh, these are my hands, this is me on YouTube, this is me with a mind, with beliefs and thoughts. And when you start thinking about Allah and you start thinking about God, even something as simple like that is deep, right? It makes you think about Allah's design. Or when you think about the human body, or you know, the stars and the way things are. But then when you have another lens on, the lens of disbelief, everything's like, meh, you know, oh yeah, that's normal. That's normal. You know, nothing's amazing anymore.
that's right,
Everybody's high. You know, it's like one of those gray days where it's just gray and rainy, and it's just,
everything's mundane completely.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes think to myself, I mean, obviously, when you don't have a belief in God, you can still function, you can still be a good person from the perspective of doing good deeds. But I often think to myself, how can you go through life being on a train, not knowing where the train's going to end, like where it's going? You're just enjoying the journey. It's just, and you're not thinking about like what's going to happen after we die, or even a trajectory. Just like yesterday, one of my relatives passed away, and at the normal time that I am on my laptop doing work, that same time I was actually inside the grave, lowering the body. Like, there was me and my cousin, we were both physically inside the grave, and I was like, really, like, I didn't want to be there, so I was just waiting to put the body in, turn the body, and get out. And I was in the grave for maybe 10 minutes, right? And then my cousin pulls me up, and then I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I couldn't be in there 10 minutes, and I was getting anxious. Imagine, like, that's your destination. Yeah. So we're not comfortable. We're not comfortable unless we know what's happening. And I think maybe perhaps that's why reverts like yourself, you know, a big part of your journey is trajectory, looking into where are things headed. like, where am I going after this?
Definitely. Like, I mean, the afterlife is something that when we're young and all that, even to a lot of people when they first sort of embrace religion, and I mean, of course, when you're thinking about things on the periphery, you do think about the afterlife. But when you're first like you're taking your first steps as a revert, and you're kind of getting used to certain things like the practice and all this. Even at that point, like very early on, the afterlife kind of escapes your mind a bit. But then you do have down, like inevitably, the only thing promised in life is death. Like someone will die, and it hits you hard, and you're just like. I had a conversation with a non-Muslim friend of mine a little while back. His grandmother passed away, and we were sitting there, and he was really like, the way he was talking about death was so different to like my perspective, obviously, as you'd imagine and all that. But it's really different just thinking that like, wow, like, all due respect, but I really wouldn't want to be in your shoes thinking about death, thinking about someone I'd love, like just, that's it, done. No, no more. Like,
yeah. And also, when you think about death, you no longer, a lot of things that seem so important, they're no longer that important.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's one of the things that death does, and which is even why, to get a clear mind, one of the things to do is just to think about it, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us that, paraphrasing here, but the most wise of people, the most intelligent of people are those who remember death and prepare for it. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of like the person who they revised throughout the year, and then the exam came, and the people who are flunking, and then they try to do an all-nighter, and then and this is something I want your thoughts on. Is it the case that most people, they don't think the way that you were thinking, or is it the case that, I mean, in terms of trajectory, where you're going, life after death and all this, or is it the case that they think about it, but then they just park it, they just keep it at the back of their minds?
I think it's a bit of both, and like I said, I think inevitably we're all going to be reminded of it, and like you say about death, kind of bringing perspective and stuff. I mean, obviously, like something that worries me a lot, my family being non-Muslim and everything, like I make dua every day, and like it's something. But honestly, like when we have a little argument, and I think any of us are being a little like I'll get a bit stubborn at if I think someone was a bit too right wing with their views on foreigners or something, I'll tell them off or whatever, and then we'll have a little spat, and then I just think like got to think like there's really nothing guaranteed tomorrow. There's nothing guaranteed at all, except someone's going to die eventually, and it just brings everything back down to earth. And I think for a lot of people, they do obviously every now and again when like an older family member or something passes away, they're forced to think about death. But for the most part, they do just put things to the back of their mind. They don't want to think about that. A lot of people don't even want to think about tomorrow. Like they'll have work tomorrow and they'll be uptown. Like they got to be up in 6 hours and they're there getting drunk, and like people are just, it is escapism. That's the only way to put it from everything.
Absolutely. And especially our loved ones, and even people we grew up with, and so it really wakes you up. I mean, I sometimes think about my non-Muslim friends who they're not Muslim, and at the end of the day, I even think about myself. I mean, the worst thing I can imagine happening to myself is apostating from Islam, and I don't believe anybody leaves Islam. I think Islam leaves you. Right? Allah takes it from you, and these things are really, really scary. I mean, at the end of the day, I think life is about getting serious before things get serious. And I used to think about this narration of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And actually, before I mention, I'm going to mention, when I was listening to your story with Yusuf, which I recommend everyone watches, you were mentioning how you were the sort of the life of the party and the main person who's like doing the antics and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that sort of reminded me that, there are people like that, and we do live in a culture where it's about having fun, jokes, and these types of things. But then I thought about the narration of the Prophet ﷺ where he said that, excessive laughter, it will kill the heart. And I started to think about this, and I thought, like, I myself, especially when I was non-practicing, I was just like, kind of like you, like just like laughing and joking and always doing pranks and this type of thing. But then I started thinking, actually, when you have that attitude all the time, then when something serious happens, you don't know how to act.
Yeah, you're dumbfounded, definitely.
Yeah, you're not prepared. Yeah, because you think everything is a joke. I mean, The Daily Show with that guy, I've forgotten his name. He used to be Jon Stewart, but now it's another guy. He's half black, half white, South African.
I know what you. Yeah.
I've forgotten what his name is. Maybe somebody can put it in there. So now and again on YouTube, his video comes up and you click on it and he's making jokes and the audience is laughing with him and it's very funny. Like he does Trump impressions and he does this, he does that. Now with coronavirus, rummaging through the world, people dying, people gasping for air, and he's making the same comedy sort of clips from home, but he's no longer in a studio. He's wearing like a hoodie, right? The camera's a bit more not as good quality. There's no more canned laughter. There's no more audience. And when you watch the videos, they're not funny at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're living in such a difficult time that it's kind of like, yeah, his name's Trevor Noah. Someone just put it there. It's like, Trevor, come on, man. Like,
give it a rest, mate. Yeah.
Give it a rest, mate.
No, definitely. I mean, I've had friends that are also like that. They're kind of like always try and throw in a one-liners. You say anything at all, they'll be like, oh, just gonna go meet Tim over at the park. It's always like your girlfriend, whatever, and all, just all that. And then when you say something serious, a lot of times they don't have anything to offer. They're just like, because they're anticipating. They'll be like, oh yeah, I got something to tell you. They're rather that, you see the sparkle in their eye. They're ready to drop this great one-liner, and then you're just like, yeah, dogs just died, and they're like, and they're just, you're dead right. It's life is like, it's serious. You think what's going on all around the world and stuff. Like you think of trials and tribulations about Ummah, like it's serious stuff. Like to just constantly blank that out your mind, inevitably you will be forced to think about it. And better that you start thinking about it when it's someone else and not you, because you never know that it could be you going through those.
I mean, one thing which I fear a lot is accountability. Right? So I believe, and I think this is obvious when you read the Quran and you look at the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, every person is not only responsible for their actions, they're responsible for their potential actions, meaning what they could have done, the skills that they have.
Yeah.
So, that's for me is obviously something that I think, I have certain wisdom when it comes to dealing with atheists. I try and share it. But also when it comes to reverts like yourself, I always like to remind them that your responsibility to the Western world, to the British public, is far greater than mine. It doesn't matter if I was born there, or if my great grandchildren are going to be born there. Because at the end of the day, Allah says in the Quran that He sends messengers in the language of the people. And the scholars say the language also means the culture and whatnot. And I really see that when you look at the Sahaba, they went back to their tribes and they were the most effective at giving the dawah to their tribes because they were from that tribe, even though they were all Arabs. And, converts like yourself, you have a huge responsibility because at the end of the day, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, your grandchildren, right? You want to have a whole, generation of people who are like, okay, he was the first guy in our family to accept Islam, and now it's normal for us to accept Islam.
Yeah,
someone has to be inshallah, someone has to be the trailblazer. So I always say to reverts that once you get your basics right from the perspective that you know how to pray, you know how to fast, just the basic stuff, and just start making videos, start talking, start being the public face of Islam. Because one of the things which I've seen time and time again in the dawah is that when I'm speaking to members of the British public, who are mostly, say, Caucasian, right? There's a barrier. Race is a barrier. And we can't be naive and think it's not a barrier when it actually is.
That's right.
And people like to connect with themselves. So, for example, if you even go to a mosque, you'll generally see Pakistani people hanging out with Pakistani people, white reverts with white reverts, black reverts with black reverts. Human beings like to segregate, although we shouldn't, but that's what we do. So, do you feel that burden? Do you feel that responsibility? Do you think that's something that's a big responsibility on converts?
Definitely, because I feel like to my friends, but until I came along, like thinking of Islam, thinking of Muslims, it's just this kind of exotic, like, something that they do, like, doesn't affect us, like Islam's just for them, whatever. Then I come along and be like, yeah, I go along with that, I'm a Muslim and that. And they're just kind of like, oh, right, okay. Now it's all close to home. Now it's just kind of, now they're forced to, I don't force them in terms of you got 3 options, but now they're forced to adopt some of my practices. Like, I'll go around the house with, oh, excuse me a minute, do you mind if I go and pray in your spare room, whatever? It's things like that. And that's things sometimes when I'm with them or when I'm talking to them, I don't want them to think that, this is just like, I'm no longer Steve now, I'm just this shell, this beacon of Islam that, like, you have to, like, just accept and kind of be part of your life in terms of this outside force has come in and infiltrated. I don't want them to see that. I want them to see it in a way that's like, and this could really be beneficial to any of us, any and all of us. And alhamdulillah, one of my friends who a few years ago would be the sort to kind of really scoff at religion, whatever, I was speaking to him and he said, like, I wish more people did adopt religion. He didn't say Islam, soon, inshallah. But, he saw the benefit. And that's the most important thing in the dawah. It's not just to say, like, look, Muslims are all right, we're friendly, we're not terrorists and all this. It's more important than that. It's like, this is a difference that not only society needs, not only that religion will be good for society, but this will be good for you. This isn't just something that, oh, I can get on with Muslims. You can benefit from being a Muslim. That's the point. You've got to give dawah in a way that's like, you make it seem how, like, talk to someone almost as if they already are a Muslim, especially if they got an interest. Don't just be like, don't talk about Islam and it's completely removed. Because, we believe quite firmly that everyone initially is a Muslim. So it's not this kind of completely far away idea, bringing someone so far away all the way back. It's literally just like, remember, like, when you were really young, you believe this. You've just got to consider it like cleaning the dirt of the social condition in a way, and the Islam is already there. You've got to treat it like that, not just kind of like, oh, we got a job on our hands, boys. We're gonna have to, like, do all this convincing. If anything, it's not you're programming someone, you're deprogramming someone. Because a lot of these values as well, these values that seem strict and that now, like, even 10, 20 years ago, a lot of them really weren't all that strange to us. Modesty was sort of, I mean, even like that old clip that everyone knows about of the women in England 100 years ago wearing a hijab and all that. Like, a lot of these fundamental principles and values and, like I say, discipline and all this stuff, it really isn't that alien to people. It is just within very recently, in the grand scheme of things, that all this dirt has been piled on top, that you've got to be just nihilistic, hedonistic, that's the way to live life. And that's just what we've got to strip away at,
Absolutely. And, when you look at things within the UK, which are really good, things that you do not have in other countries, in fact, a lot of Muslim countries, you can trace those things back to Christianity, Christian values. Those aren't things from atheism. Atheism is very recent. So I remember when I was at school, I mean, we had Christian teachers and they were lovely and they used to impart Christian values, which were actually for us Abrahamic values. They were exactly the sort of thing that we as Muslims believe. Things about modesty, things about rights, and these types of things. And those things are gone now. I mean, I can imagine, because I'm about 30, I'm 35, so I'm like 14 years older than you. So the things that my teachers said in the late 90s, right? when you were at school, they'd probably get sacked. Like, that's how quickly things changed.
Yeah.
That's how quickly things changed, right? And it's strange to think that such a traditionally Christian country, Christianized country, is so rapidly becoming hedonistic, nihilistic, and, you know, it's just going through these changes. And, you know, we need to tell people that, look, when you come to Islam, you're sort of coming back to those values.
Yeah, that's right.
That made society great. I mean, there's this whole, you know, if we look at a particular narration, which is from Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu, who is a companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he gives he praises the Bani Asfar. The Bani Asfar meaning the Europeanized people, the Western people, right? Because remember, he was somebody that conquered Syria, conquered Egypt, and fought in these lands. And he gave traits about Bani Asfar, or Romanized Western people, which includes obviously Europe, North America, Australia, and some parts of Latin America. And one of the things he said about these people, and remember, this is 1400 years ago, he said they are people who are kind to orphans and children. They are people who are quick to recover from war. These are people who stop the oppression of their kings. Now, these things that he said, they're still true today, right? I mean, the traditional Christian ideas of charity, of taking care of people. I mean, if you go to any part of London, you find homeless people, you will find people going and feeding them. But these things are dying. And we want to tell people, do you know what? If you come to Islam, these things are going to come back to life again, right? Islam's not a force that's going to come and it's going to be like a reverse colonial force. No, in fact, it's going to resurrect those Abrahamic values that existed in the West, that actually anything good in the West came from those Abrahamic values. They didn't come from secularism. So yeah, go on.
100%. Like, that's the people think, as I say, of Islam as this like exotic, far away, almost like unattainable for, you know, common British people. And it's like, no, it's like it's much more close to home. A lot of the benefits from society all come from a similar way of thinking, from the same Abrahamic line of thinking. Those qualities, that's right. It's very profound.
So we've had some questions for you, and let me try and find a good one. What challenges did you face when you converted to Islam?
For me, a funny thing was it's all the really little things, like the kind of general principles like praying and all that, like weren't really too hard for me. It was the things just like, right, halal meat only, because like little things that I was so used to, and always like, you know, I had a load of different like logos and stuff on my top, really like big old plain red hoodies and all that. Like really small things that I was just kind of, you've got to get rid of like attachments to like, oh, you know, but I look so good in that. Like, you know, it's not about like looking good. For me, it was really the kind of more nuanced things. Like it's difficult to explain, and kind of like I said earlier, a big thing is kind of thinking about like trying to get my family on board and stuff. That's probably the biggest challenge. But I'd say it's more the small adjustments that initially you don't see the kind of wisdom in, and it's not until you get a bit more advanced in your Islam you realize, hang on, I don't need to see the wisdom in stuff. And everything isn't removed as well. So one of the hardest times I think to be a Muslim is when you've got these sort of base principles like praying and stuff, but then you're also still involved in the kind of secular lifestyle, and you don't realize that like they're not compatible. You can try and marry the two as much as you want, but then the more you embrace Islam, the more you be like, actually, you realize you don't even want to do all this stuff. All this social conditioning starts to get erased, but kind of getting to that point is difficult. When you try and marry the two, you try and be like, not even that you try and make the haram halal. You might not realize what you're doing is haram, but you kind of try and make excuses. You try and sort of live both lives at the same time. That's harder than fully embracing Islam, I think.
That's a very good point. One analogy I heard, which is, I think it drives the point home, is you can't have two masters.
Yeah.
You actually have, because there's certain things which completely conflict. You know, between Islam and liberal values, and we just have to be frank about that. And when you're trying to do both, right? When you're trying to, for example, when I previously worked at B&Q or in engineering and other places, free mixing is just, I mean, it's not even a thing, free mixing. I mean, it's only when you become a Muslim, you start to realize actually, you know, you shouldn't be interacting with the other gender unnecessarily, right? But then in an environment where that's the norm, you start to justify it and you start to normalize it and this type of stuff. But eventually, you know, deep down, I mean, there's always this thing, there's fatwa and there's taqwa, right? There's a particular ruling and there's somebody gives and there's a feeling that you have in your heart. And, you know, you start to realize, you know, Allah doesn't want this. Yeah, Allah doesn't want this unnecessary, you know, talking to the other gender and this type of thing, these types of things. Another good question that we had, well, Natasha has basically asked the same question about what you struggled with. But another good question is from HC, who pretty much joins us every day, right? So Stephen Rust, what is your rational justification for Islam?
Rational justification. Oh, no, isn't it? A big one, a big ask. The rational justification, like you've got different arguments, like, you know, the scientific arguments, the whole, very simply, the whole, you know, oh, nothing came from nothing. Like, I'm not satisfied with that word, but you just see with Islam, right, the success of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the life of the Prophet. You study the seerah, everything that he accomplished and everything, and you just think, was this guy a fraud? Like, was this guy just like, for him to be able to accomplish what he accomplished, it's unlike anything else. Unlike, you just, honestly, I think just study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I think if you're honest with that, and then look at the teachings, like, you know, with fasting, you got like athletes now. I mean, like Anthony Joshua, a few other boxers, whatever. They're endorsing the ideas of fasting. The proof is in the pudding. Even though we don't embrace it, we don't believe in Islam, you know, just to benefit us in this life, is for the hereafter. But it just so happens that it also, to me, if you're honest with yourself, you understand why these rulings that, you know, appear old and ancient on, you know, face value and all that, that no, they apply to society timelessly. And if you're honest with things, you understand. I mean, just talking about free mixing, I was talking with some of my non-Muslim friends, and one of the biggest reasons that men commit suicide, and that men, I'm not going to say the reason, is to do with like relationships. It's to do with heartbreak. It's to do with unnecessarily like interaction. If we're honest with the reality of these things, when you look at progressive societies, right, and look at the typical differences, you got pornography. Is that conducive? How many experts have come out and talked about how detrimental pornography is to marriages, right? You look at alcohol, and you know, the prohibition on alcohol in what's considered to be like regressive societies. How conducive is alcohol to your health in society? And you just got to, I don't know, to me, it almost, I don't want to sound like patronizing because different people have different experience. To me, it seems intuitive enough like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the fact that he managed to have the most successful empire in history. And why it's the most successful empire in history is because the empire is still growing. It's an empire which hasn't actually ended. You know, the Mongols, they ended, the Romans, they ended, the Persians, they ended, the British Empire ended. But, you know, here you have an idea which just keeps growing. And now and again, it's not just the Arabs, it's then the Turks who become the bastions. Then it becomes like the Indians, and then it becomes like somebody else. So, you know, it's a very, very powerful argument. For anybody that's interested, I mean, I covered this in quite some detail in the talk I gave on the true one, Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? Which I spoke about some of these things. Now, Natasha's asking, would you agree on the topic that new reverts aren't getting enough help from the Muslim community as they should, especially during Ramadan and such?
To an extent, definitely. And I think what's interesting, actually, is something I've been thinking about, it's for sisters, I think, more so than brothers. Like, alhamdulillah, I've been blessed, I've been approached a lot. But sisters have a very unique journey to Islam to brothers. I mean, you look at sisters, I mean, they're the forefront of Muslims. They're the, when you have headlines about Muslims, it's niqabi, hijabi sisters. The majority of hate crimes and that are at sisters. Like,
Yeah.
a lot, and obviously they're the mothers to our future generation. Like, sisters are the burden bearer. And I think we give very universal dawah, which is great, alhamdulillah. The dawah is very useful. But I think there should be much more of a concentrate on the sisters' journey, because it is unique. You have unique struggles, unique challenges to overcome. And I think some brothers, I think the heart's in the right place, but you just need to be a bit more sophisticated when it comes to sisters giving talks and stuff. Like, you know, some brothers, like I said, probably well-meaning, that say, oh, why does a sister need to give a talk? Why kind of, you know, we don't need to be seeing sisters on. And you just need to be more sophisticated, yeah. Because as much like male role models as young male Muslims have to look up to, like, what have the sisters got? And like I say, they got a unique journey ahead of them. And when, you know, reverts are alone on Ramadan and stuff, like, there's this kind of faux pas that anything to do with, like, Muslim sisters is inherently sexual and inherently kind of like, oh, be careful. And that shouldn't be the case. We need to take more a sophisticated understanding and approach to dawah when it comes to sisters. That's my take on that.
And you know, you said something quite interesting about the fact that women have a unique journey and unique challenges. I came across a situation a few years ago where a sister who converted to Islam left. And when we basically tried to contact her through other sisters and, you know, what's going on, her basic story was the standard story. You know, I became Muslim. And, you know, everybody is doing takbir, Allahu Akbar, you know, welcome sister. And then I'm left on my own. I don't have any friends. I'm alone. And I left Islam because I'm lonely. And she actually said these words that she did not leave Islam because she thought it was wrong. She just said, nobody came to help me and I was alone and I can't deal with this. And she left Islam. So I totally agree with you. And I think with brothers, it's kind of like, you know, like, I got to know you through Yusuf. I got to know Yusuf through an email he sent me. Brothers are a bit more maybe extrovert, you know, they just talk to each other. You know, women are a bit more reverts to maybe a bit more like, okay, how is someone going to judge me? I'm a white sister wearing a hijab, or a black sister wearing a hijab. I'm walking into a place with all brown women and they all seem to look at me in a certain way. I mean, there's so much pressure, you know. I'm not saying, obviously, there's some sisters who are very extrovert and that's not going to work with them, but they have unique challenges. And I think you're absolutely right about that. And they need to have, I mean, inshallah, soon I'm going to be, I'm trying to set up a live stream with, inshallah, Lauren Booth, because you need those figures. You need people to say, look, here I am. I'm a natural human being. I'm not gonna, you know, I don't have to totally throw away all my identity, and it's just part and parcel of me being Muslim, and you can be Muslim too. That has a huge impact on people. Now, another great question just before we end is, what was the main idea that took your heart for Islam?
That's a good one. I think for me, it has to be that it's not just an individual journey. Like, it's not just something, and that's one of the things that sort of made it stand out to some of the more like Eastern philosophies, that, you know, you're reaching spiritual enlightenment and all this. And I could go into how that just didn't quite do it for me, but the fact that being a Muslim is for, like, you know, if I see an old lady struggling across the street, like, it's Sharia is to go and help her. Like, you know, you're not just a Muslim for you, it's the community, and you genuinely have that, like you talked about, a sense of accountability. Like, it's the realest form of accountability I can think of. And the fact that people practice that, and, you know, it's like, they say that, like, obviously the better idea of dawah is obviously in good actions, and I 100% agree. But it's like when children don't listen to their parents, that's because their parents give them one rule, but then they don't respect their parents because their parents might feel that they're, like, you know, being too strict on them, and They see their parents' double standards. You know, the old "don't do as I do, do as I say" sort of thing. Being a Muslim, like, it's not that you practice it inwardly and outwardly. Like, it's and just like the holistic framework. You know, you've got the political side of things, you got the spiritual side of things, just all aspects of life. Like, as I said, not just internally but externally. It's the full package for me.
Yeah, I really love the way you've explained that, because even though Islam is it's an individual journey, you do feel like you just entered a package. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you feel connected to the people of the past, the Sahaba. You feel connected to other people, right? Where I used to live in Harlesden, you know, and we have this in Harlesden, in Lewisham, in these rough parts of London, like Brixton as well. You literally have these brothers who are each other's necks when they were non-Muslim, and you know, they were involved in post-code wars and all these types of things. They both took Shahada and they go and pray Jummah together, right? And they put aside all the beef that they had. And Islam is like, it makes them think, you know, all those things we were doing to each other all those years ago is total nonsense, right? You know, you find that beauty. You find that beauty that, you know, I feel more connected to, say, a Japanese convert to Islam who is strong in his iman, then I feel closer to a British-born Pakistani who's not practicing. Because the gel is iman, the gel is faith, the gel is not race, right? And that is so profound. And for me, that's like one of the things, that Islam is like a package. Like, you enter into this history, you enter into this future. And that's why I'm very, very keen on getting young brothers like yourself online and, you know, talking to people about Islam and conveying Islam, because at the end of the day, I mean, even somebody wrote in the comments here, it's going to be hard for me to find because there's so many comments, but somebody wrote in the comments that one of their revert friends actually said that they would not have accepted Islam if Islam was given to them via an Arab or an Asian. And and I totally do not see that as a bad thing, because it's just human nature that you look at people, like a lot of people. I mean, I was, how old was I? I was 16. I was 16 when 9/11 happened, right? And I remember very clearly, before 9/11, for the average white person and my own white friends, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism was all just a weird brown religion. It was all the same. There was nothing. It's just like, oh, those brownish religions, Hinduism.
That's right.
And only then was it, well, okay, this is a brown religion like the rest of them, but this brown religion is a bit more toxic. And they kept associating, and you do get this till today, you get this association by British people of Islam with color, right? And that's why even, you know, being Islamophobic is seen as being racist, because Islam generally is adhered to by certain, you know, what's it called, races. And I remember when the EDL turned up at Speaker's Corner, and this is at the time when the EDL were really popular. I mean, now they're just fizzling out, a bunch of middle-aged men, but they were really popular in 2010. And I remember they came to Speaker's Corner, and, you know, they're just shouting and talking. And then I took one of them, you know, wanted to have a nice, calm conversation with him. And he, away from the cameras and the rest of his mates, he was quite a decent guy, actually. I thought he was just with the movement. I don't think he really believed in that stuff. It's just like, well, they all go to the pub, they're all my mates, I might as well join in. This type of thing. He was very scared of Islam. And, you know, he said, you know, I do fear Islam and I worry about Islam. So he did believe that. But then when I was talking to him, right next to me was another brother, and he looked at him and he recognized that this guy is white. And then he said to him, why did you become Muslim? He was really genuinely interested. And to think this guy was wearing like a EDL, whatever, yeah? And he just looks at a white revert. For me, he sees me as a threat and he's debating about Islam. He sees the other guy and he doesn't even say, you know, why does Islam allow this? He just said, why did you become Muslim? And he said it in a polite way. And that's the power of having, people giving dawah from those communities. So I'm a big believer that, Jamaican reverts to Islam should be giving dawah to Jamaican reverts, and white people to white people. Of course, everyone should be giving dawah, but the impact is exponentially more.
Definitely. That because the relatability is there. Like I say about my friends, like a lot of people, until they meet white Muslims, they don't think, they only think, like you say, Islam is a brown religion. They don't see it as something that they could, embrace. They just see it as this exotic thing that, like, oh, it just exists. When they see it as something like, see me practicing whatever, they might be like, oh, hang on, actually, this guy's Muslim, and it doesn't seems to be a normal guy still. Like that's important, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want you to give the viewers a last sort of thought for, Ramadan, how you intend to spend maybe your Ramadan, or something you've been thinking about. Because I always like to end the show with some nasiha, some advice. And it always seems to be, whenever I ask for it, it seems to hit home.
I've got a lot to live up to. The thing is with Ramadan, like almost like what I started with Ramadan, is like you start to realize that there's never a completely ideal time to do anything, right? And so when Ramadan, it made me realize how much time I was wasting, like, snacking, thinking about food, or like, putting things off. And like, I'm sure even to people, you might struggle listening to music or something. Like, and a lot of reason people listen to music is escapism, to like change their mood or whatever. Could be watching YouTube videos. Like, I'm not saying that that's all bad. That like, there's some good videos on YouTube, but sometimes you just find yourself in a rabbit hole. But Ramadan makes you realize, like, strip life down to the basics. Like, what are you here for? Like, you don't need to be constantly filling yourself with food just as something to do. You don't need to be constantly just distracting yourself with all this, because even though we're Muslims and, like, especially more disciplined of us, like, we stay away from certain things as it is. Sometimes even as the white Muslims, we still fall into the trap of escapism, escaping into things that are technically halal, but that's still a trap that you want to avoid. Well, remember what you're here for. Remember your purpose. And remember, charity is emphasized throughout Ramadan. You think how difficult it is for other people to fast, and you just think there's never going to be you might not be in tip-top shape. You might be a bit hungry. You might be a bit tired, and that. But still, you've got to carry on and do what you have to do. And that should just be a Muslim ethos, that even though times aren't ideal, all the struggles that we're facing, still get and do it, still be a good Muslim. Because, the point of Ramadan, Eid is almost like a metaphor for the afterlife, isn't it? If you complete Ramadan, you complete the fast, you've got Eid to look forward to. If you get on, be a Muslim, you've got, inshallah, to look forward to. So that's my kind of...
That's a beautiful message. And it was actually, funnily enough, I was actually thinking about that, because I sometimes, like today, I went into this halal escapism just before this live stream. Scrolling through Facebook, scrolling through random videos.
We've been there, yeah.
Our fast is broken here because it's nighttime, right? So as the last hour of the fast, I was literally in halal escapism. I was just scrolling through and wasting time, when in reality, I mean, it's ridiculous that I'm like, okay, I've got an hour left, when in reality, I just ate like 15, 16 hours ago. People sometimes in the past, people used to eat once every 2 days.
Yeah.
Other people, they live in the desert. I mean, we're so, I just think about myself, right? I just think, why the hell am I so high maintenance? Why do I constantly...
No, same here, bro. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, we're just so high maintenance, bro. And it's just sad when, not all of us, but I'm speaking for myself here. Anyway, bro. Sorry?
I don't need to be constantly pumping myself full of food. We don't eat even because we're hungry anymore. We just eat as something to do. We just know food's in the house, but someone's got to eat it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like that. It's like that, definitely. But it's about creating urgency. I mean, I've been, I've been I'm in love with people like Tony Robbins, right? Tony Robbins, the guy about, psychology and, self-motivation and self-development, and also other people that are big into personal development. One thing that these people always say is think about death. Even though they're non-Muslim, subhanAllah, even they say think about death. Because death is that death ground that creates new possibilities for you to achieve things, because you start thinking, right, I've got to do something in my life. And like the Prophet ﷺ said, value the 5 things before they go. So value your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your life before your death, your free time before your busyness, and there's one other one I've forgotten. But yeah, we have to value all these things. So thank you again for joining us on the live stream. I definitely want to have you back again, and this time probably just bring you on from the perspective of revert help. Because I get contacted. I mean, I got contacted a few days ago by a American brother who was panicking when he contacted me, because he said, I've been looking into Islam, but since this coronavirus has come, I've started panicking and I want to take my Shahada. So, I sent him stuff, and Alhamdulillah, he took Shahada, right? And it's kind of funny because when I was, when he sent me that message, and then literally a few days later, he was panicking and he's asking me questions about, can I pray if my hair or something? He just had these weird questions. I said, listen, just relax. Just relax.
Yeah.
Don't worry about, these small things, just this. So he was like, because in his head, bless him, in his head, it's kind of like, okay, so the coronavirus is here, everyone's dying, I might die, let me take Shahada and let me be the perfect Muslim. And, you can't do that. You can't be like the perfect Muslim. There's no such thing, the Sahaba, the Prophets. So may Allah bless you. May Allah guide your family. That's something that you mentioned earlier. May Allah make your journey easier, and we will hope that you will join us again in Ramadan.
Yeah, inshallah. I hope to.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thanks for having me on, brother.